Welcome to another edition of Bunker Office Hours, a weekly live show brought to you by the team at Bunker Labs, a national network of veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs dedicated to helping the military entrepreneur community start and grow their own business. I'm your host, Iron Mike Stedman, joined by my co-host today, Amy, and our special guest, Michael Freed. What's going on,
Hello,
Amy and Mike?
Howdy.
how's it
So
going?
we're going to be talking about, first of all, Mike has an amazing app that he's building out addressing shyness, social anxiety, a lot of stuff that's coming up now. The more and more, people continue to push through this pandemic or come out on the other side of it. And so we're excited to learn about that. But before we do that, I'm going to pass it over to Amy to talk about any updates that are taking place in the bunker over the next few weeks.
Thanks, Mike. So we've got a few things happening as we've been talking about the last couple weeks. Veterans in Residence 22B Showcase is happening on June 1st. So that's across 23 cities. So you can RSVP for that free event at bunkerlabs.org/veteran-showcase and find an event near you. And then we also have a couple applications open. So the applications are open for the USAA 100th anniversary pitch competition in Seattle. And then you can check out that at bunkerlabs.org/USA-pitch. And I think there's also Charlotte interest form is also open for that, but the Seattle one is the one that's actually open. And then we also have the Breaking Barriers in Entrepreneurship workshop applications are open this week. So you can apply for that workshop series. It's an 8-week workshop series for Hispanic, Black, Asian American, and female entrepreneurs. So that is open now. So bunkerlabs.org/breaking-barriers for that one.
Amy, I'm going to put you on the spot. Why are we doing the Why are we doing the Breaking Barriers and Entrepreneurship Workshop series?
So that one, we're addressing systemic barriers to entrepreneurship for those specific groups of entrepreneurs and business owners. So it's for your early stage entrepreneurs, particularly, so you can get so they can get a real foothold in what it means to run a business, get the basics of running a business down, and then and also Renee, who runs the program, is really, really good at getting those grant opportunities out there and really getting people the opportunity to get some capital and get started on a strong foot so you can break them barriers.
Yeah, it's a great program. I do the marketing for it. And for me, it's all about agency, right? How do we give more entrepreneurs agency so people can come, let their guard down, whether it's on the podcast, whether it's on our various different programs. And so, take advantage of it. Please apply and let us know if you have any questions while we're on the chat here. So without further ado, I get to pass it over to my guest for today, Michael Freed from Maka Social. So Mike, do me a favor and go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, my name is Mike Freed. I'm the founder CEO of Make a Social, and we are trying to do something about the loneliness epidemic, which I didn't realize 3 years ago that this is a huge problem. I started this company because I was extremely busy, so I didn't have a whole lot of friends left that I could just call up on the spur of the moment and say, hey, let's go out. So I'm sitting at a bar by myself, and I find that I am on Facebook instead of talking to the people around me. And as an extrovert, I really need a large amount of social interaction in my life. But I didn't realize that you could be shy and be an extrovert at the same time. Like, I thought there was something wrong with me. Come to find out that almost a quarter of the population falls into that category. It's not unusual at all. So I knew this is a problem for me. As the more I did research, the more I found out this is a big problem nationwide. Our Surgeon General officially declared an epidemic of loneliness his first term in office. It affects more than 22% of the population. It's not just a state of mind. It's a stress state that causes physical damage similar to smoking. And it's a leading cause of loneliness, not loneliness. It's a leading cause of depression and anxiety. So
it's interesting, right? Because you would think with us being more connected between Instagram, social, all this other stuff, email, it feels like people are more connected now than ever. And yet there's this huge void, like you say, in terms of loneliness. I feel like you were talking to me when you're talking about like introvert. Like I'm an extrovert, but I actually spend a lot of time just solo dolo. So I'm interested to learn more about how your app is addressing that.
Well, we found that loneliness is actually caused by a few different problems. The first is social anxiety, which is one of the major things that we started with. This affects over half of the adult population in the United States and is especially common in the younger generations or Gen Z and the late millennials. Basically, the more technologically connected we are, the more likely we are to experience social anxiety. Um, and uh, this is really a lack of practice. We're doing a lot of our communication online. It's asynchronous, meaning that we're not communicating and at the same time. I can send a message and it'll be 10 minutes sometimes before I receive a reply. I can carefully craft the message that I send. And this is very different from in-person communication. And the online communications also do not generate the same kind of um, or the same kind of hormones in our bodies that face-to-face communication do. And those neurotransmitters are vital to our like well-being. Um,
So how does your app address this?
so our app addresses this by addressing some of the symptoms of social anxiety. Um, you a walkthrough of how it works is that you would check into a participating location with a pre-made profile. The profile is very simple. It basically asks for relationship status questions just to get that out of the way. And then, what are your favorite conversation topics? And what's the most interesting fact about you? And by checking into a location, you're visible to other users in that location, so that I can see you across the room. I can see that you have a profile and make a social, and I know by because I can see you that you're receptive. That takes care of my fear of rejection. I can see from the information in your profile exactly how to start a conversation with you. So that deals with the fear of not knowing what to say or having to make small talk. And just by giving you this inside information, it can give you a big confidence boost, which is another one of the symptoms of say is just a lack of confidence. If you're really not feeling it, you can use it passively. You can be checked in and wait for somebody to come talk to you using the information in your profile. And then there are safety features built in which cover like the fear of physical harm. So those four symptoms are what we've been able to identify through research as what we actually mean by social anxiety. I have a fear of one of those four things or like several of those four things.
Got it.
So
So what I want to do is for those of you that are tuning in, I want you to feel free to drop some questions for Mike as we continue. Shout out to Michael Perstinger, Josh Wilden, ex-vets. I see y'all almost every week tuning into the show, so we appreciate y'all. And so, Mike, I want to talk about your entrepreneurial journey, bringing this thing to life, okay? So number one, how did you fund it, right? Are you bootstrapping it? I see you doing a crowd fund, but even just to get the MVP out. And then number two, I'm going to be asking you about, how did you validate that there was a market need?
so far it's been bootstrapped. I used all of my savings, then I took out a huge loan on my house. Like it's all coming out of my pocket right now.
Oh, you're
And
all in then.
it feels ironic sometimes that I'm paying two employees while I'm driving Uber Eats because the company is not paying me yet.
Yeah,
So they're getting paid out of my savings account while I have to work another job. But that's the entrepreneur life.
it is. How did you feel comfortable doing that, right? So there's a lot of people that are tuning in, right? And they're like, I need to get started. I got this great idea. And a lot of them are trying to raise outside capital. But I keep coming back to this over and over again. A very small percentage will be able to actually raise outside capital to fund their business. So you got to actually have some skin in the game. So like what made you take the courage to actually do it, go into your savings, etc.?
Most companies are self-funded initially. Bootstrapping is the first step, friends and family is the second step, angels is the third step. If you don't have those in place, unfortunately I feel like we live in a system where you're not going to be able to get much of a business off the ground. especially if you're doing something that takes a lot of startup capital. And if you have a brilliant app idea, I'm here to tell you that's not a cheap startup. Like, development for a basic an app similar to ours costs in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $120,000. It is not like starting up an eBay business. Like,
That's right. These developers, man, they're charging a premium, right? And that's where a lot of money's
they
going
do.
towards. So going back to validating a business idea, and I want our listeners to engage and think about this, right? So it's one thing to come up with an idea. It's another thing to say, okay, is there money in the market for this, right? Like, are people actively spending money to address, like you said, social anxiety, to address all these different challenges? And if so, you come up with this app idea before you invested your savings and did all that. How did you know that this was a good business model?
I did it wrong. And I'll
All
tell
right,
you
there we go.
the way that I did it is not the way that anybody else should do it. I started asking around. I started asking if anybody else had the same problem, and found out that, of course, a lot of people are saying, yeah, I relate to that. Yes, I have that problem. But that's not really telling you anything as a business owner, because just because somebody can relate to your product doesn't mean they'll purchase your product. There's a really great book called The Mom Test that I wasn't introduced to until I was already 2 years into this journey, that really gives you a better grasp of how that market research should be done. So lucky for us, after we went and spent a fortune on creating an MVP, we went back and did the research correctly and found that, yes, this is a problem that people not only can relate to, but they've wished that there is a solution for. And we are pre-revenue, so we haven't actually proven that people will pay for it, but we have a much better idea using that mom test philosophy that people are actually going to be interested. And I think it's the major premise of the book is you don't want to ask anybody a question where they're going to lie to you. It's like, hey, do you like my idea? Of course they're going to say yes.
So
You need to ask questions that relate to them and not to you.
So from the time you came up with the idea until you launched MVP, and for our listeners, MVP stands for minimum viable product. How long was that time frame?
For us, in actual time, it was about 2 years. In actual work, it was maybe 5 to 6 months. And that's because COVID happened. We had the idea and got started. We incorporated before COVID, and then immediately COVID shut us down. We didn't have a strong developer in-house, and it was extremely difficult to network and try to find a developer who would work with us on a stock basis and not just as a job during COVID, because it was extremely difficult to get out there and meet people and interact in enough volume to find that unicorn of that one person who has the talent, the drive, and the commitment to do this kind of project.
One of the reasons I was asking that question is because I'm a fan of, I say business is a contact sport, right? So you don't know what you don't know until you get out there and get in the ring, get punched in the face. Then you start learning real quick. And one of my worries when people delay their launches is that they're denying themselves of that kind of market-based feedback, right? That idea that, like, oh, you go out to the market and you're kind of making all this stuff, basically insulating yourself versus doing it in public with customers and stuff. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think you should have launched a little sooner?
Oh, I completely agree that we wanted to. But first of all, COVID shut us down in being able to network. It was very difficult to meet people. I've already covered that. Second of all, our app is based on meeting people face to face. There is no online interaction with Make a Social. We are trying to get you talking to people.
Gotcha.
And that was not something that could be done during most of the shutdown. It wasn't until restrictions started to lift that we were able to find a reliable developer, and then just recently get that product out there for people to start testing. And that was around January. And we've actually learned more in the last 4 months than we learned in the first 2 years, because we were able to get an actual test product out there to get people to play with.
Got it. Now, Josh Wooden wants to know, is there a way to identify in Micah if someone is a veteran? And have you introduced your platform to the veteran service organizations?
There is no way to identify that you're a veteran unless you volunteer that information. There's a free form question that'll ask you we phrase the question in 4 different ways, but it's basically what's the most interesting thing about you, um, and you can answer that you're a veteran. If you want to put that you're a veteran in one of your conversation topics, that you want to talk about your military experience in one of your conversation topics, that's up to you. But we actually have very little filterable fields because we don't want exclusion. We want inclusion, not exclusion.
Got it. All right. So Vet asked us a question. He goes, "What suggestions do we have on a budget-friendly marketing strategy?" So I'll let you go first, and then I'm going to share my thoughts.
That's a loaded question because it really depends on the product and the market.
Yeah.
What are you trying to sell and who are you trying to sell it to? There's thousands of ways to market, and all of them are going to have to be tailored to what you're doing.
So for me, Vet, what I'll tell you is I came up with this framework called dog whistle branding. Okay. And what you need is, number one, you need a perfect customer. This is someone that's going to be willing to pay you a premium for your product or service, make referrals on your behalf, and basically be a joy to work with. Number two, you need a whistle. This is a platform of some sort to communicate with them. It can be an email, it could be an email newsletter, it can be your social channel. It's the preferred platform that they're on that gives you direct way to demonstrate your value, right? So you don't want to be on TikTok if they're not on TikTok, etc. And then number three, so clothing and apparel, right? And number three is you need a brand that differentiates you from the competition and really identifies your kind of tactical advantage, right? So why they should be working with you, your value. So you really want to plant that brand into the ground, that brand flag, say, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, this is the value that we bring. Now, for a lot of us tuning in that are talking about budget friendly, the best marketing strategy we're going to be having is tied to our perfect customer. And I believe it's going to be hand in hand sales, right? Like close clients, right? So you sell apparel, get them to rep the apparel, go sell somebody else, And that's going to give you brand awareness. They're going to start sharing it. People start associating them with your brand. And that's going to put money in your bank account while also allowing you to build that brand awareness. Because even here locally in Newark, some of my kids have apparel companies, and I'm always texting them when I see other people wearing their apparel. So the best marketing you're going to get is by people wearing and repping your product. So the more product you can get in their hands, I feel like that's going to be helpful. All right, I want to go back to Mako real quick. All right, so you bootstrapped, you've got your lessons learned, and you're right. You're like 2 years, but you're right. COVID just kind of snapped. So there's a lot of it kind of just took that time away from us. As you're thinking now towards the future, right? How are you? Your savings invested. You've gone all in. What's the big next? I don't know, big goal that you're trying to accomplish over the next 6 months.
Well, just this weekend, we're launching for the first time to our first paying customer market segment. We're launching in private parties first. And this is kind of more of an extended beta than a long-term strategy. But we're able to by doing this, we'll be able to get the app into the hands of a lot more people and test under more controlled circumstances while bringing in a little bit of capital. We're doing that primarily in the wedding industry because those are the largest and most expensive parties that most people are ever going to throw. So we're debuting at our first expo this weekend, for the first time making actual sales. We're still continuing to throw our own parties and our own events around Tampa Bay to get more testing in and get more exposure in. Our first step towards our long-term strategies is going to be universities and military bases. And we are actually making good progress with talks that I can't reveal a whole lot of details about at this time, but we're expecting to be live on one of the largest military bases in the country by midsummer.
Got it.
As for funding, we're crowdfunding. We're raising on wefunder/makeus.com/makeusocial. We're trying to raise, I think it still says 50,000. It needs to be changed. In reality, we're trying to raise about 200 grand. And that's going to we actually hope that's going to turn the corner for us to where we can survive on that if we have to. Any additional follow-on raise would just be for growth.
Got it. All right. So I got one more quick question before we transition to book recommendations. Michael wants to know, does Maka plan on having more social interaction fears that people can participate in, such as finding gym buddies and training partners?
It's really going to depend on going to a participating location. The location is our paying customer. So if you think that this would be a good fit for your gym and you think that the gym would pay for this service, by all means, even if they're outside of our primary marketing strategy, which is, at first universities and military bases, we can still do a bar, we can still do a gym, we can still do a library if that customer wanted to come to us.
Got it. All right. So now we're going to go to one of my favorite parts of office hours, book recommendations. And Mike, do you have any book recs for our listeners today, our viewers?
Well, I've already mentioned The Mom Test is probably
Right.
the best book that I've seen on how to properly do customer research. I wish we had that in the beginning because we would have saved a whole lot of time. And I don't know, luckily things worked out for us, but we would have known early if they weren't going to. The second book is Together by Vivek Murthy. He's our current and former Surgeon General, and he literally wrote the book on the loneliness epidemic. This is that book.
So my book recommendation, I'm actually do a podcast rec, is Lockhead on Marketing by Christopher Lockhead. Great book. He wrote Play Bigger and Niching Down. And, a lot of people ask questions about like marketing and how they should think about it. Check out his podcast. I listen to it almost every week. I text him afterwards. I mean, it's really great. And Chris is the godfather of category design. So this idea of creating your own marketing category and positioning your product or service in that space to be the category king. He's like done multiple runs as a CMO, like 3 times. He advises tons of startups. So it brings tons of value. And I want to check out that podcast. And going back to tech products, right? I feel like the book that I'm always going to keep recommending to people is number 1, Start Small, Stay Small by Rob Walling. I had him on the Transition podcast. It's a great podcast. And he talks about a developer's guide to basically bootstrapping a technology product. So he walks you through how to do it, how to find these niche market opportunities, and how you need to think about positioning it and funding it, because there's so many people that are building out tech products that aren't getting outside capital. And I feel like the more traction we can get our community with their MVPs, with everything, right, that if they do seek out funding, it's going to set them up for success. So really check out, if you're thinking about building a technology product, I want to strongly encourage you to check out Start Small, Stay Small, and also The Minimalist Entrepreneur by Savile Lavingia. Another great book. And I should probably just do a whole episode on those books. They're amazing, tons of value, and I want you to check those out. And as we close out here, I got one more question coming in from Austin. He wants to know, Mike, what was your biggest challenge while expanding your idea, the business from idea to reality?
These are probably 2 sides of the same coin, but it was finding the right team and time management, because we have members of the team that have been with us since the beginning who are still very committed to the cause and very committed to doing what they can, but they've got a full-time job and a family, and they're only able to put in like 5 hours a week. So in the beginning, when you're on an extremely tight budget, you take the help where you can, but you've got to be able to balance that with like, is this person even going to be effective? And that's been a constant struggle for us since the beginning, I think.
Yeah, there's something about the founder really carrying that dream alive. Even me with Ironbound Boxing, right? It's been 6 years, and I realized that no one lives and sleeps it the way me and my partner do. It's just the way it is. People come and go, and you're still here. So really leaning into it and understanding the responsibility that comes with it. And so, Mike, man, it's been great having you here today. We'll be sure to send all our listeners, go check out Maka Social. We got you in the ecosystem. He's down in Florida, y'all. So we got to keep elevating these amazing entrepreneurs within our ecosystem. So again, it's been an honor having you on, and we'll include the links to your website below. And for everyone tuning in, make sure you check out the Transition Podcast. Got great episodes dropping. Again, depending on, we got stuff. If you're an early stage entrepreneur or even a seasoned entrepreneur that needs some motivation, check out the Transition Podcast. We've dropped some amazing episodes. This week, I have Yusef Henrique's episode dropping, and Yusef from Indigenous, right? just won the Johnson & Johnson Quickfire Challenge, right? Smoked it. This is his second startup. So he brings tons of insight into the entrepreneurial journey. And I mean, he had to start over. So it's a great story. Be sure to check that out. And I will tell y'all, our number one downloaded episode right now is how to acquire your first 100 customers that I recorded, I don't know, a few months ago. And it's really taken off. So if you're in the early stages, you're talking about how do I close clients? How do I put money in a bank account? Check out that episode on how to acquire your first 100 customers and listen to my interview with Asia Arangios on how to navigate your first, how to successfully navigate your first go-to-market journey. Those two podcasts together should really set you up on a strong path towards building a sustainable business, and more importantly, validating that business model, because you can't validate it if you don't have money in the bank account. So I'd like to acknowledge our virtual event sponsors for today, the MetLife Foundation, and their commitment to supporting veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs transitioning into the workforce. Not only do they support this platform, but as well as the Transition Podcast. We appreciate you, MetLife. Make sure you're also heading over to bunkerlabs.org and get plugged into the ecosystem. We have programs that'll take you from idea to invoice, incubate you, and position you to grow alongside other founders and CEOs. Get connected, input your email, and take advantage of these amazing programs. And check your email, because that's the other thing too. We're sending a lot of these updates about what's going on in the bunker community, opportunities available in the Veteran Entrepreneurial Network, and also highlighting some amazing entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. And so to stay up to date on all this stuff, you want to make sure you check out that newsletter. We put a lot of time on the marketing side of the house, making sure we get you a good newsletter with valuable information. So we appreciate you being on the show. Mike, again, it's been great having you here. And until next week, everyone, peace, love, and have a great rest of your week.